Hello, guys, and welcome to episode 9 of Baker's Chatcast. And today we are joined by explorer Rob Penn, who tells us all about his interest in bread, cycling, and the shows he's done with Freddie Flintoff. I hope you enjoy. Rob, thank you for joining us today and giving us your time. How have you been throughout the last few months? Obviously, people will know you as someone who likes travelling, which obviously probably will have been halted throughout the last year. How have you been managing?
I've missed it, to be perfectly honest. I like traveling. I like riding my bicycle in foreign countries. I like meeting new people, and those are all things that have been a mainstay of my adult life. So I've had to do without them for a year. But correspondingly, it's been really lovely to be at home with my family. I've got 3 teenage kids, and it's been really nice to hang out with them a lot. I've also spent a lot of time baking, so my bread's got better, which is good. And I think there's also something magical about really, really getting to know, your own place through the different seasons. So it's been all right, but I'm looking forward to the lockdown ending.
Aren't we all? And as you mentioned about your baking's got better and your bread, you actually managed to release. You've actually been working on a book, haven't you? Which you actually released last month, Slow Rise: A Bread Making Adventure. Could you tell people a little bit more about this?
So I mean, one of the things I do is write books, and I write what's called narrative nonfiction. So in essence, what you're trying to do is find a kind of good idea which hasn't been written about a lot, and something which you think you can throw new light on. And then what I tend to try and do is try and find an interesting or strong narrative vehicle that you can use to tell that story. And so bread, obviously, I've eaten a lot of bread over the course of my lifetime. I gave up eating bread about 10 years ago because I worked out that modern bread made me ill. And that meant that I started reading more about it. I stopped eating it. Came to understand that, it really was modern industrial supermarket cellophane wrap bread, whatever you want to call it, that was causing a problem in my stomach. So as I stopped eating it, started to read a lot more about it, and became aware that it's just this incredible story. And I thought it was probably worthy of a book. And lots of the books that I write tend to be about pretty unremarkable quotidian things in our life which perhaps need reappraising because their history is rich and their cultural value is rich. So the narrative vehicle I chose for this book was to plant an acre of heritage grain wheats in order to try and produce enough flour to make bread for my family for a year. And that's exactly what I did. And I did it in a pretty basic, pre-industrial way. I sowed the wheat by hand. I cut it with a sickle. I had it milled, I threshed and winnowed it myself in a barn at home. I had it milled in an old water wheel, a water mill, and then I made bread at home using sourdough starter for the family for a year. And it was a wonderful experience. I worked out that I'm not much of a farmer, but I ended up eating the best bread I've ever eaten.
Have you always had an interest in baking? And if so, how did it all start?
So weirdly, I haven't, I grew up in the 1970s. I grew up on sliced white bread. My mum happens to be an amazingly good cook, and she actually ran her own catering business for a bit back then. But she worked full time and, never thought that she had a moment in her week to bake bread. So we never ate home baked bread when I was growing up. And that kind of carried on all the way through university, and then working, in the 90s when I first started work. I'm still eating, pretty normal bread. And then I cycled around the world in my late 20s. So that was the mid to late 90s, and came across just an incredible variety of amazing breads. You know, I mean, every region you cycle through in places like Turkey and Iran and India to some extent, but also sort of, you know, sort of southern corner of Europe, amazing regional breads. So, you know, you might ride your bike for a day or two, and the bread that you got served in a normal restaurant by the side of the road was different. And this just opened my eyes completely to this whole incredible world of bread. And then I ended up living back in London, and I lived very close to something called the Old Post Office Bakery, and that was one of the first sourdough, perhaps the first sourdough bakery in London. And this was in the late 90s by now. And you know, I used to buy bread there on my way home all the time. And we had a whole food shop at the end of the road, and we used to, you know, eat there wholemeal brown bread, which was absolutely fantastic. And that's how I first got into it. And then I gave up eating bread, as I mentioned, and then about 8 years ago now, probably 8 years ago, someone brought a sourdough starter to our house and gave it to my wife, and my wife learned to make, you know, slow risen, slow fermented bread, and I totally fell in love with it. And then my wife taught me to bake, and my, you know, my interest has just rocketed ever since then. And I've tried to make loads and loads of different breads over the years, and it's incredibly easy to get distracted. You know, so many very good baking recipe books. And, you know, you can travel around the world without leaving your own kitchen, just with bread. But you know, the thing that I love to do most is to make sourdough bread with wholemeal stone ground flour from heritage wheat varieties. And, you know, and I am convinced that is the best bread I've ever eaten.
And you've released a couple of books, well, quite a few on this, if I'm right.
On bread, or on other subjects like this?
Other subjects like that, a few.
Yes. Yeah. So the last two books that I wrote, you know, again in this narrative non-fiction genre, where, you know, trying to illuminate the unremarkable. So the last one was about the ash tree, and it was about man's relationship with the ash tree over the course of civilization. And, you know, so it's my argument that the ash is the tree which we have relied upon most to develop and advance ourselves as a human species since the beginning of civilization. It's an amazing tree, and of course currently afflicted by something called ash dieback, which means that we're going to lose, you know, tens of millions of ash from the British landscape in the next few years, which is an absolute disaster. So I just wanted to get people to think about the incredible variety of ways that ash has been used by us, you know, to make our lives easier for thousands of years. And then the book before that was basically about the social history of the bicycle and how the bicycle changed the world. You know, and as I said, I cycle around the world. I'm a very keen cyclist, ride a bike most days. And, you know, again, it's a pretty humble object. Most people just take it for granted. They have one in the garage and they use it, you know, sometimes to go shopping, sometimes for a bike ride on the weekend, but they don't really think about it and what it might have done to us as a species. And it's an amazing story. So yes, you know, those are the last two books and before bread.
This leads me perfectly on, because you've just said there about cycling, and if I'm right, you left your city job at 27 as you found the love to travel the world. And it might be more now, but have you done 40 countries and 5 continents?
Yes, I have. Actually, it is a few more now. So I think I'm sort of probably into the, you know, high 50s. Actually, I haven't done a count for a while of countries visited. I haven't got beyond the 5 continents. But yeah, you know, food and the culture that goes with food, and new roads and new mountain ranges and trees in particular. I'm a great fan of trees. You know, trying to visit the world's trees is, you know, gives me great pleasure.
Have you had like a certain moment in your life when you decided that you just wanted to go and travel the world before you left your job?
Yes, it's So I used to work as a lawyer in London, and I realised, one particular day. So I used to ride a bike. I used to commute across London by bicycle, and so there were two things that coincided. So one, it was a February, and it rained every single day in that February. So this was kind of mid-90s, mid to late 90s. And it rained every single day in February. And I just got so depressed cycling to work in, foggy, grey, misty, wet days. And I thought, I'm really not sure how much longer I can do this. And then the other thing, and this is kind of very particular to working in a firm of solicitors, one of the weird things about that is that you can see yourself. If you meet someone who works in the firm who's 5 years older than you, you're basically going to look like that in 5 years' time. And you're going to wear the same suits and the same shirts and the same ties, and live in the same sort of house and live in the same sort of part of London and have the same sort of kids. And that applies to someone who's 10 years, 15, 20, 25 years, 40 years older than you. And I sort of looked at that and I thought, oh my God, so that's basically your life is mapped out in front of you. Yeah. And I thought, I can't do that. That's just throwing your cards on the table right now, and so I decided to give up that job and cycle around the world.
Obviously, you've been very successful, because you've just said there you were well into the 50s now with the countries you've been to. Do you have a favourite place where you've been, like where you just love the culture, the food?
So Iran is very high on my list, which I know would come as a surprise to a lot of people, but it is the kind of press that Iran gets and Iranian people get is incredibly negative, and not many people really know what the country is like. So the landscapes are amazing, and the people are incredibly cultured and very, very kind and wonderful. And cycling across Iran, it almost happens every day you're there. Someone drives past you, pulls over on the road in front of you, and invites you to their own home to come and stay, or at least to share a meal with them. Yeah. And I wouldn't say especially that the food is amazing in Iran. It's good, but it's not amazing. But the people are amazing, and but the bread, Iranian bread, is just fantastic, and they've still got quite a lot of heritage wheat varieties in production, and their baking techniques are great, and their bakeries are amazing. And I thought the bread was totally sensational. So that's one. I loved India. I still love India for the kind of cultural diversity and the richness of the people, and all the languages spoken and all the different foods eaten there. I thought that was an amazing place, and so I still love India. I haven't been back for a while, but I've cycled across, I cycled from the bottom of it to the top, and totally fell in love with the place. Where else? So I went weirdly for this journey, for this book, the bread journey, the bread book. I went to Jerusalem, and I never appreciated. So it's an amazing city, obviously, for all sorts of reasons, but it's just got incredible history, and it's complex and rich and nuanced. But I thought the people were great, but particularly I thought the food was just off the scale. And I would say that it is probably the best bread in the world, just for the richness of it. So you think about all those cultures that have moved to Jerusalem over the course of the 20th century, and they all took their breads with them from whatever country they came from the USA, from Hungary, from Romania, from Iran, from Iraq, from Yemen, from Jews from everywhere came, and they all brought their bread cultures, and they're all represented in the city now, and the bread is just off the scale good.
And I imagine it's brilliant for someone like you as well, meeting all these new people and finding out what they're all about and everything.
Yes, very much so. You know, to me, that is, one of life's simple pleasures. Is so I'm a great believer that everybody's got a story, and you just need to ask enough questions to winkle it out. And over the course of doing it for 3 decades, I've got reasonably good at being patient, keep asking, keep chatting, keep smiling, and then eventually a complete stranger will tell you an amazing story. And that's gathering those stories has always been a great pleasure for me.
Obviously, like we stated earlier, your travelling has been a little bit halted because of everyone knows why. Is there anywhere in particular you would like to go back to or maybe visit for the first time when people are allowed to finally go and travel again?
Blimey. So, I mean, I'd certainly go back to Iran. I'd really, really like to do that. There's a couple of places. So I've been to Georgia, sorry about that. I've been to Georgia, but I've never been to Armenia. And I'd love to go to Armenia and actually that kind of corner of Turkey as well. So sort of between that bit of Turkey, between the Black Sea and the Iranian border. And I think that, there's something really interesting that great wheats are grown there. It's got really rich bread history as well. And I think the food's great. And I've sort of got a hunch that the people would be incredibly welcoming and great as well.
And hopefully you will be able to do that soon if this ever goes away. Well, it will do.
Fingers crossed, Mark.
Still on the theme of travelling, you've done a few shows with Freddie Flintoff, haven't you? First of all, how did you meet Freddie?
Pretty random, really. So it was a sort of TV thing. So I'd made a couple of TV programs before meeting him, and then I talked to a TV production actually here in Wales, TV production company, about possibly me trying to make a TV program about cycling down this road called the Trans-Amazonian Highway, which runs south of the Amazon basin. And, so really motivated by my interest in trees. I'd never been to the Amazon before, and I'd always wanted to go. And the idea was to cycle down this road, and the road is a sort of metaphor for everything that's gone wrong in the Amazon in the last 40 years, basically. And then a TV commissioner at Sky, who, where Freddie's a kind of mainstay and is very well known for his work at Sky, or used to be slightly before Top Gear, but he did a lot of work at Sky. And this commissioner said to the TV production company, have you got any ideas about making programs about the Amazon? We'd like to make one, commission one. And the commissioner said, would you, we've got this idea, there's this guy called Rob Penn, he cycles down this road called the Trans-Amazonian Highway. And the commissioner said, sounds great, but nobody's ever heard of Rob Penn, would he take Freddie Flintoff? And, we went, yeah, okay. So we met once, in an office of Fred's agent in London. And, we had a cup of tea and a tray of biscuits, and Fred always said that he liked the custard creams and I liked the chocolate bourbons. So, we got on really well. And we did get on really well. He's an incredibly simple, charming, delightful man. And, we spent an hour in this office together talking. And then at the end of it, we agreed that we'd like to go to the Amazon together. So we went and spent a month traveling down the Amazon. And then we made another 4 TV series together over the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and also about food. We went around Britain in a fish and chip van making fish and chips.
And one of the most memorable things from that, the fripper.
It was brilliant, wasn't it? Yeah.
Them trips. You've obviously been to Australia, but the UK one was brilliant as well. Yeah,
I mean, we had so much more fun in the UK than we did in Australia. I mean, we had such a gas traveling around the UK, and that is, basically, British people are fun, right? And you open the side of a fish and chip van and ask people to come over and buy some fish and chips, and you will be having a gas almost immediately. And it was terrific fun. And Fred's brilliant like that. He's just so good with people, and he's so good at getting people laughing. So you're off like that, and it really might be a totally and utterly dingy Wednesday afternoon in, I don't know, Essex, but you're having fun, with him, and it was great. We had such a laugh.
And is there anything in particular that you like about these road trips and just being around Freddie?
So I would say that, so he's got great sense of humour, and he's spending time with him is a really good lesson in civility. He's incredibly polite. He's just really, really, well brought up lad, and just amazingly polite. And if you go out in a kind of really crowded, into a really crowded place, right? I'm trying to think of one. We went to the Norfolk coast on a beautiful day in June, and there were thousands of people there. And we were trying to film, we're working, right? Trying to film what we were doing, catching crabs on the pier in that instance. And he got stopped and asked for a selfie by 500 different people. That's when I sort of stopped counting, right? And so it may have even been more than that. And he said yes to every single one. And, massive interruptions, huge delays to us, and the film crew, and you've got cameramen getting impatient, and a producer who wants to get the whole thing done and shot and get home, and we'll get into the pub and have a pint at the end of the day. But Fred was like, no, yeah, that's good, you can have one. And just really, really polite man.
Obviously, you mentioned earlier your love of trees, not so much to his delight, but when we seen you climb one when watching the show, I've always wondered, how have you got such a big interest in trees? How did this all start?
Well, so I grew up in the Isle of Man, and which is not a place particularly rich in trees, but it's got some fantastic woods. And we spent time in those when I was a kid, so it was sort of always there in here. And then when we moved to here, where we live now in the Black Mountains in Wales, 18 years ago, I realised that they're an incredibly important part of the landscape, and that if I wanted to connect myself to the landscape in some way, trees were the kind of best vehicle for me to do it. And it's a subject that just keeps on giving. You will never get to the end of it. Do you know what I mean? There are so many different species of tree, not that many in the United Kingdom, but globally, and they're wonderful things. You stick one in the ground and it changes from year to year, every year for the whole of your life. So fascinating subject, and deep pleasure and endless interest.
And you've
Actually, you've got to watch Fred on this, because he is actually quite interested in trees, but he just pretended on camera that they were really boring just to annoy me, and it sort of worked. But he's also one of those people, you tell him something and he will look at you and go, forgive me, but I think you've mistaken this for the face of someone who's interested in what you're saying. But he listens, and so this would happen to me. He'd look totally bored when I was telling him something about trees, and then a year later he'd repeat it back to you, and he was listening all the time. So you've got to watch him, and he is quite interested in trees.
You even slept at one, didn't you, one time?
Yeah, we did. We did, on the Isle of Wight, which was amazing. It was magic, actually. And it took us both a long time to get to sleep, because you have to overcome that fear that you're going to roll out of your. So you're basically in a tiny cot, 100 feet up in a tree, 80 feet up in a tree, and you know, it was, yeah, and but it was great. And then, you know, you wake up in the middle of the night to hear the wind in the leaves. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful.
Do you and Freddie still talk to this day now?
Yeah, we're in touch a bit. I've been in touch a bit during lockdown. So actually, I'm involved. We were talking about trees the other day. So um, I'm involved in a tree planting project here in the Black Mountains now. Small charity that we've set up to try and put more trees in the ground. And I said to him, would he come down and plant one? And we were talking about it, you know, in between the lockdowns in the autumn. But obviously we haven't managed to pull it off because of you know what. Yeah.
And obviously, you still wind each other up a lot. For example, when you thought he was gonna make you take part in that horse racing contest.
That was a proper wind up. And you know, he even got Bob Champion to come along and
Yeah.
give me some riding tips, the bastard. Yeah. I mean, it is. It sort of wind up thing started off as a kind of TV device, right, to make the programs more interesting. But we both really got into it, and you know, and then we couldn't stop. We couldn't, you know, and that was a proper wind up. Yeah, I haven't got over that one actually yet.
And obviously, you got him back by taking him to that supposedly haunted hotel and having a night in that room.
It's such a funny thing. So he's such a big lump of a bloke. You think that nothing would intimidate him, but actually, ghosts really, really give him the shivers. He'd be under the bed like that if something came our way from the ghost world. Yeah, so we got him back. Absolutely got him hook, line, and sinker.
But after all, if we can really see that you do really enjoy the company of each other, and you must have a great time.
Yeah, we do have a great time, and I think it's a really good lesson in that, you know, in that we're not, you know, we're different ages, we're from different parts of the country. You know, there's not much on paper that would suggest that we might get on with each other and be friends. But I mean, I think that's a really interesting, funny thing about life. You know, you don't know where your friends are going to come from, and we got on great. You know, got on really great. We had a lovely time.
Do you have any in particular favourite moments? Because I can recall that breakfast one. That must have been brutal.
Oh my God, that was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. I mean, we did some amazing things. You know, so going diving with seals off the coast in Northumberland. That was an extraordinary experience. So they come incredibly close to you, you know, and you're just bobbing around in the water. I don't know what, trying to look like a seal. I don't really know. Obviously, we were in the hands of professionals, a guy who's extremely experienced. And this seal came up, you know, and I remember sort of turning around in the water, and there was a seal basically giving Fred a kiss on his goggles. It was absolutely priceless. And that was great, but also some of the, you know, the very simple things, you know. Yeah, we found one of those roads in Ireland. You know, those roads which are an optical illusion. So you park your car on the road and you take the handbrake off and you think it's going to roll forward, but it rolls backwards just because it looks totally weird. And we found one of those roads in Ireland. We had such a laugh doing that. I mean, it's an incredibly simple, basic thing, but it's great. No, we had a great time the whole way around.
And when you were playing the music in the car, I found it hilarious when you shot that Cheryl CD out of the window.
So that's the one thing about Fred. His taste in music is awful. Absolutely terrible. Oh my God. So yeah, I was burying CDs everywhere, and some of them just had to go out the window.
Obviously, you do have a brilliant time, but what I'd like to know is, would you ever get that green chip van out again and go on another one?
Well, I'd sort of love to, but just because we had so much fun with it. But I mean, I think I know Sky owned the chip van. So they bought it and did it up. And I know that they've sold it, and I can't remember where it is now, but someone sent me a picture of it once, a kind of year or two ago.
Wow.
Selling fish and chips there. So it's gone. So, I mean, I think we'd have to invent something new if we were to have another go, but nothing on the cards.
Did you ever have to pay any damage after you crashed it that time?
I did not crash it. He crashed it.
Or was it Freddie? I can't remember.
Freddie crashed it. I did not crash it. He tried to say that it was partly my fault. It was not. He just drove it into a low concrete wall, took the bloody top off. So no, we didn't. They were very generous. They recognised that it was an accident. You know, it's one of those car parks with the low, we forgot that we were in a high vehicle. So we just drove into the car park and put a great big hole in the top.
Obviously, it would be great to see you back out there in one of them again, because them trips were just brilliant.
Yeah, they were good fun. They really were. He's a lovely lad.
Finally, Rob, it's been a pleasure. And what I will do for you is I will link your books in the description when this video goes up, in case anyone has seen this and wants to buy it.
Thank you very much. That would be very kind.
Brilliant. Huge thank you to Rob for giving us his time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you have too. And I'll see you next week.